Hello, my name is Carrie Hespen. I'm a pharmacist with Regional Health and more specifically the Tech Check Tech Site Coordinator at Rapid City Regional Hospital. The following presentation is obviously regarding Tech Check Tech. I gave this presentation in April at the annual meeting, but was asked to provide a recording for those of you that weren't able to attend or for anyone else looking for more information on Tech Check Tech. And before I go any further, I have nothing to disclose. For objectives, I want to focus on three things. And number one being the most important, basically, what is our purpose of a Tech Check Tech program? So being able to define that goal. Number two, listing the necessary components for implementing and maintaining a Tech Check Tech program. And lastly, listing the requirements needed to obtain Tech Check Tech validation. So that would be more specifically for the technicians. For those of you unfamiliar with Tech Check Tech, it's basically just how it sounds. It's one technician checking another technician's work rather than a pharmacist for only certain items. And those certain items in this case are medications specifically stocked in an automated dispensing cabinet. In our case, that would be an Omnicell machine, whether it be Pyxis, whatever you have, but in our case, Omnicell. Or it's medications that are pulled from our stock that will be sent up to the floor, unit dose items. But the main staple or component of those medications are that they have to be barcoded. So we stock meds by barcode, we pull from our stock by barcode, we load into the machines by barcode, and then the nurse scans prior to administration by barcode. Okay, now that we have our definition, what is our goal? Well, before I get to that slide, I do like to share this quote. I feel like it was a little ahead of its time. It's from 1977. Whitney said, "The lack of the use of technicians and technologists for preparing and dispensing drugs is one of the prime impediments of the expeditious development and growth of the clinical pharmacist." So the goal is to allow pharmacists to redirect their time. More time for clinical activities, and those clinical activities reduce medication errors, improve patient safety, and overall increase our job satisfaction. As for the technicians, their job satisfaction is also increased by expanded roles and responsibility, and they do have the added benefit of a pay increase. So going along with our purpose of a Tech Check Tech program, I thought it pertinent to provide this information. In 2009, there was a survey sent out by the American College of Clinical Pharmacy with 1,400 pharmacists responding, stating that 55% of their workdays were spent performing tasks specifically related to dispensing, and only 16% of their time with direct patient care services. And the reason this is so significant is because most medication errors occur at the prescribing and administration level and not at the dispensing stage. So we're spending a ton of our time on that dispensing stage when we could have technicians doing a lot of that and redirecting our focus to more the prescribing and the administration level. And then I just provided some support there. There was one study that found 66% reduction in errors when a pharmacist participated in ICU rounding and 51% reduction when they participated in general medical rounding. Tech Check Tech has actually been around for quite some time. The first model was developed in 1989 in Minnesota, and that's actually the model that we have followed. Many of these states listed below there have followed that same original Minnesota model. There's at least 15 states currently utilizing Tech Check Tech, if not more. This information was taken from a review article in 2012, I believe. So there could be more since that time. The first group of states there actually has it written into their pharmacy law. And the second group of states, including South Dakota, they actually file a rule variance with the Board of Pharmacy to allow them to participate in the program. So I know specifically for us, each year we file a variance with the Board of Pharmacy because our rules state that a pharmacist must check all medications prior to dispensing. And we get a variance to that rule stating that a validated Tech Check Tech can check those medications. I do want to talk about some of the data regarding technician versus pharmacist accuracy. It does look really good favoring technicians when you just say that there's been 11 studies and 6 of those show significant difference favoring technicians. But take that with a grain of salt. These 11 studies have been published since 1978, so a huge time frame there. They're varied methodology, varied practice sites, and varied medication use systems. So of the 11 studies, there's actually only 3 that are same sample studies. So those I'll be talking about on the next slide. There have been 11 studies published since 1978 assessing technician versus pharmacist accuracy. Of those 11 studies, 6 showed a significant difference in accuracy favoring technicians. But take that with a grain of salt because I'm about to go into some of the specifics of those studies. There are multiple limitations. If you look at that time frame, 1978 to 2011 is when this review article was taken from. So if there's any in the meantime, I don't know about them, but in that 30-year time frame, things have very much changed. So we'll look at a varied methodology, different practice sites, and different medication use systems. There's multiple limitations of the studies that have been done. Okay, so when we look at the 3 same sample studies, by same sample, they mean that the technician and the pharmacist were given the same medications to check, and they were also given the same errors introduced to detect, so to say. This first study there took place in a tertiary care facility. 15,000 unit doses were checked, and this was over a 5-week period. 500 errors were introduced into that group of 15,000, and the error detection rate was significant. It showed the technicians to be 97% accurate and the pharmacists to be 94.3% accurate. The next study took place in a specialty pharmacy. These syringes were checked for a dialysis unit, and there were 10,608 pre-filled medication syringes. There were no errors introduced at this site, and this took place over the course of 6 months. The accuracy rate was below, fairly similar, but they did note in this study that the technicians found almost 70 errors that were false errors. So they talk about the time that it took for the technicians to have a pharmacist double check that. So that is one kind of exception to the other studies that they talk about in that second study there. And finally, the third study took place at a children's hospital. There were 8,500 unit doses for cart fill, and 19 errors were introduced into that group, and that took place over the course of 7 days. The error detection rate was 100% for both. So when we look at limitations of these 3 studies, we're looking about different time frames, different errors introduced. They didn't comment on the severity of the errors found by the technicians versus the pharmacist. So obviously a wrong drug is very important versus maybe an expiration date by a day. I don't know. So they didn't look at those things. But these are our best 3 to go off of. So as for program specifics, this is pretty much across the board. All tech programs. They're usually designed for inpatient or long-term care settings. The pharmacy technician undergoes specialized training, written exam, training packet, one-on-one with a pharmacist. They have ongoing quality assurance audits, and scheduling may be different, frequency different, how many errors, all of that can vary, but all of them have some sort of auditing tool in place. And then they have a site coordinator or pharmacist in charge responsible for maintaining the documentation and making sure that the program requirements are met. Specific to Rapid City Regional Hospital, we have adapted the Minnesota model and modified that slightly to fit our facility. But again, our technicians check our automated dispensing cabinet restock, and they also check unit dose medications. And there are exclusions to those unit dose medications. Everything basically has to have a barcode, and has to be scanned prior to administration. So regional, as you know, has many outlying facilities. We do not let our technicians check things for clinic because those aren't barcoded or scanned prior to administration. We don't let them check things for our cancer center. The cancer center does not use BMV either. So for the most part, it's Spearfish Regional Hospital, Rapid City Regional Hospital, anything loaded into one of our machines, and anything pulled from our carousel sent to the floor with a barcode. Also, in order for our technicians to become validated, they must first check 1,500 items for Omnicell fill and 300 unit dose items. That max of 3 errors and max of 1 error there, those are both 99.8% accuracy rate, 99.7% accuracy rate. And they also get a packet that they study beforehand, and then they take a written exam with a passing score of 80%. As far as loss of validation, I do just want to touch on this quickly. They can only fail 2 audits within the period of 1 year, and that also includes making errors. They can only make 2 errors in the period of 1 year before losing validation. So we track all errors made in the hospital, and if it happens to be a technician who is validated that made that error, we put that in their file, and that would count as a failed audit or error in the period of 1 year. So they can only have 2 of those prior to losing validation. Anybody that checks a product not allowed by policy, we have never run into this. I really don't see it as too much of a problem. Everyone's very respectful in the rules of the policy and know what they can and cannot check. And then we also list in there just an attitude overall unbecoming of the profession. I've listed our auditing schedule here. Once a technician becomes validated, we perform an audit in 1 month, and then it's quarterly for a year, and then semi-annually for another year, and then it drops down to yearly. In these audits, I introduce anywhere between 1 and 5 errors, and anything that they miss would be considered a failed audit. Anything they get on top of the errors introduced, I write those down. We basically keep track of any errors, but a failed audit would be missing those introduced errors or any other error that was unintroduced that they did not find. So what happens in a typical audit, we have the entire tower of Rapid City Regional, the medications pulled for loading those machines. We put errors into the medication pull. And as an example, there might be a metoprolol 25 milligram tartrate that I fill with a 25 milligram succinate. And so that would be an example of one of the errors that they would have to catch. The technician goes through and checks all the medications, and then I go behind them and check all the medications after the fact. So it is a very time consuming process, and just something to be aware of, that these audits do take quite a bit of time. In the beginning of the process, we always made them unannounced, but since we've had more and more technicians become validated, it gets to be impossible with schedules. So now these audits are pretty much planned. They know when they're having an audit. I've listed all the things here that they cannot check. Obviously, anything compounded, IVs, oral syringes. We have excluded vaccines, even though those are barcoded. There's such a big room for error in those medications. Multiple preparations of Tdap, TD, DTaP. So those become confusing, so we have omitted those from our list of meds that they can check. Those pre-packed medications are actually capsules or tablets. Take it from a bottle and put into a package. Those obviously would have to be checked by a pharmacist. There's not a barcode. We're actually putting the barcode onto the medication. And those would be the same as canister fills. Unit dose controlled substances, those aren't pulled from our C2, our locked medication system by barcode, so we have omitted those. crash carts, obviously, no barcodes. And then touching on this again, anything for a clinic that a nurse is not scanning prior to administration. There are two components unique to our facility. This is where we have deviated from the Minnesota model. One being technician validators. These are validated tech check techs that can basically perform audits on other technicians. There is strict criteria to be a validator. We make them have at least 10 years inpatient experience at regional and at least 1 year tech check tech experience. But they have really been able to move our program along. If it was just myself, we wouldn't have nearly as many technicians validated just because it takes so long to perform those quality assurance audits. And I know many other facilities have commented on that, and that's the main complaint you see about a tech check tech program, is that the process itself is so cumbersome and the time it takes is really difficult for one person to do if that's not their primary function. So myself, I staff as an inpatient pharmacist and work in oncology, and I do this basically in my free time. So if that's the case for any other facility, these technician validators are indispensable. they really have changed our program. We also have, moving on to Simplify, this is our electronic bulk compounding system. And the technician's able to complete the initial check. The pharmacist still does check the final product, but they're able to enter the lot number, expiration date, and double check that and print the labels, and then the pharmacist checks the final product. So I know I just talked quite a bit about the cumbersome quality assurance measures, so I won't focus on that too much on this slide, but I do want to talk about some of the other challenges that I've experienced through our Tech Check Tech program. And the first being the most recent problem and one of the biggest problems that I've noticed lately, and that being the technician shortage. In the last year, we've lost 6 to 8 technicians that were already validated, and somewhere in that auditing process, maybe they were on their semi-annual frequency, so I only had to audit them twice a year. But now I'm getting new technicians, and they have to be there a year before they can be validated. But now these new technicians are coming through, and I have to validate them once after a month, and then I have to do it quarterly, and then semi-annual, and then it drops down. But with this shortage, there's such a big turnover as well that really adds to your time and the cumbersome quality assurance measures. I don't think that we could be as successful without those validated technicians. So technician shortage is a huge one. I do list there pharmacist and technician resistance, but really this is only right away in the beginning. We did have some people that were hesitant to have the technicians checking. There was just a lack of maybe trust or just unsure of how this would all work. And it is a big change, but since probably 6 months to a year after we started, there's not been one person that has complained or hasn't liked the technicians checking our Omnicell machine. Pharmacists are on board. As far as the technicians, there's not resistance. I would just say that there's more of a retraining of how they think of things. They may walk by a counter full of meds and not check them because that's not their first thought. So they have to be reminded a lot that, hey, you can check those. So that would be more their resistance. It's not a purposeful resistance, I would say. It's just more retraining how they think about things. And then time and quality, or cumbersome quality assurance measures. I talked about those in great length. So again, those would be the other challenges. I've listed my references here. The first one actually is a great review article on Tech Check Tech. If anyone is interested in reading, I encourage you to do so. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me. My email is listed on that first slide there. Otherwise, I hope you found this helpful, and thank you for listening.